Hello, and welcome to today's webinar entitled How to Build a Workplace Culture for Mental Fitness, Moving Your Team from Tired to Inspired. We are so excited to share our unique, wellness-focused approach for growing the emotional intelligence of everyone at work. This webinar is brought to you by Eye Opening Enterprises, or IOE for short, a professional development and media company that creates long-term culture improvement with groundbreaking training, leadership development, and organization-wide enhancements for how workplaces, schools, and justice agencies work. My name is Courtney Mack, and I lead client engagement here at IOE. Today, we will provide practical tools for improving your workplace culture beyond the buzzwords. We're hoping you leave today with deep insight and clarity about how to help your colleagues and your organization thrive, regardless of the challenges you are facing. Before we get started, a few quick items on how to participate in today's event. Today's webinar is scheduled to last 60 minutes. Due to the rich content, we want to maximize our time together. So we will respond to any questions submitted in the chat in a follow-up to today's webinar. Additionally, this webinar will be recorded and included in our follow-up to you. Now that we have that out of the way, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today. Dr. Isaiah Pickens is the founder and CEO of Eye Opening Enterprises. In this capacity, Dr. Pickens has developed several professional development programs focused on increasing the emotional intelligence for leaders and employees at the intersection of wellness and DEI. Our IOE team trains organizations, schools, and justice agencies around the world to transform their work culture and sustain organization-wide improvements through best practices for implementation, coaching, and ongoing professional development. As a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Culture of Health leader and fellow, Dr. Pickens works collaboratively with cross-sector scholars and practitioners to promote a culture of health in America. Dr. Pickens has been awarded by the American Psychological Association the Early Career Achievement Award, as well as by Black Enterprise the BE Modern Man Award, for his contributions to the field of psychology. As former assistant director at the UCLA Duke National Center for Child Traumatic Stress, the coordinating site of the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, and a former clinical assistant professor at NYU School of Medicine, Dr. Pickens has built a reputation as a national trauma expert and shares practical science-informed lessons about mental wellness with audiences around the world. Dr. Pickens aims to transform the way we all see the world with practical tools that help us communicate more effectively, make better decisions, and unlock the potential of our personal and professional identities. Dr. Pickens, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Courtney, and welcome to today's webinar. Burnout, anyone? We're not serving burnout. We're trying to go deeper and understand what drives burnout and how do we better deal with it in the workplace. In fact, me and a friend were having a conversation about this the other day, a really good friend, and we were just like, how is burnout not just impacting our work, but impacting our life? And in fact, when we started to dig deeper, we realized that burnout is about more than just how we feel stressed at work. In the International Classification of Diseases, it identifies burnout as an occupational phenomena that can have an impact on all parts of our life. We were just astonished by the fact that burnout can impact our professional efficacy, this belief in our ability to do well at work. It can actually prompt cynicism and negativity. Yeah, I guess we can guess that one. And on top of all that, it creates this sense of exhaustion and just feeling low energy in ways that we can't even imagine how we feel low energy, not only at work, but when we're doing things that are supposed to be fun. You're out with your friends and you're just like, I'm so exhausted. Burnout actually impacts that and makes things that maybe used to be fun not as fun anymore. And our conversation was going all over you know what? As a matter of fact, let me not even tell you what we talked about. Let me let him say it himself. You remember that convo we had, man?
Yeah, man, I remember that convo. I was stressed, man. I remember I was waking up in the middle of the night with just thoughts about maybe
Mm,
things aren't going to work out, maybe we're not going to make it, maybe so many maybes,
mm,
all in the wrong direction. I was trying to work out, trying to stay focused, but it was getting harder. It was getting a little harder to, focus on just other things,
mm,
relationships, spending time with the people I
mm,
love. Because in the back of my head was this feeling that maybe I wasn't doing enough. There was more that I
mm.
needed to get done, and I had to take a second and say, am I getting burnt out? I was really getting burnt out, and it was impacting my sleep, and people were saying I wasn't around as much, not just physically but just mentally. When I was there, it seemed like I was a bit distracted or
Mm,
something else was on my
mm,
mind, and
mm,
so it was making my friends and my wife and folks around me a little concerned
mm,
that maybe I was working too hard, maybe I was doing
mm.
too much, and at the same time, I felt like I wasn't getting to where I needed to go, all my goals, but it was a moment. It was a moment. I really appreciate you taking that time to talk with me about it because it was crazy.
What
It
what'd
was
you do?
crazy.
What did you do though?
Yeah, I mean, what I did was I really had to reset. I
Mm,
really had to
yeah,
reset and think about what are some of the areas that I need to either slow down, cut back on, or repurpose my energy in some
yeah,
way. It was really kind of digging into optimizing what I already had. I
mm,
didn't realize how much I could shift by just shifting my perspective on all of the works things that I was trying to
mm.
get through, on how I was showing up in some of my relationships. And so I'm really, really, I can't tell you how glad I am that we talked because it shifted the way I thought about my situation. I kind of moved from this scarcity mentality where nothing can happen
Mm.
and everything is going wrong to a more abundance mentality where I was like, there is so much here that I can do. And so, I mean, it's a journey, but I feel like I made it through to the other side. I mean, you tell me.
Oh man. So for folks who are looking at this and like, wow, they look exactly alike. That's your friend? That was actually me. One of the most important conversations that we can have around burnout is the conversation we have with ourselves. When we're feeling exhausted, when we're feeling ourselves starting to become negative and cynical and feeling like we're not capable of doing what we need to do at work or in life, sometimes the thoughts that roam through our head, that we ruminate about, can overwhelm us to the point that we need to disrupt that by having a conversation with ourselves. Don't worry, I'm not going to be talking to myself this whole presentation. I'm talking to you. And some of the things that we're going to be talking about are really focused on debunking the myths around what it means to be mentally fit. When we talk about mental fitness today, we're talking about our mental health and well being, but we're talking about even beyond that, how do you build the muscles that you need in order to sustain your ability to think clearly, your ability to feel emotionally well, your ability to connect meaningfully with others? Those are muscles that have to be built. And so just like you go to the gym to, get your weight up so you're physically fit, this is your time to go to the mental gym to get that mental fitness up so that when challenging times come, you feel strong enough to be able to see it through and get it done. And so we're going to be debunking some myths that can come along with being someone who has learned mental fitness from folks who may not know what they're talking about as it relates to mental fitness. And so, on top of that, we don't want to just leave you with the myths. We want to actually give you strategies. We're going to give you 3 strategies for how you debunk these myths, but also what do you do in place of these myths? And the strategies are focusing on 3 areas of mental fitness. First, mental fitness as a leader. How do you show up effectively and tough as a leader to get the job done, but do it without sacrificing your people? And then, secondly, how do you have mental fitness for your decision making processes? There are so many decisions that create an imbalance at times that can be super challenging for us to be able to manage. And so, how do you make decisions that better account for that imbalance so that people don't fall into burnout and go away from or have challenges with connecting with the reason why they're at work, which is to create and to do something that is meaningful and a part of their skills and their talent and who they are as a person. And then finally, and maybe that is a somewhat euphoric or utopian version of work, everyone doesn't feel so connected, but how do you make it so that it doesn't cause harm to other people as well? And then this third area that we're going to talk about is really focusing on performance improvement. So much of our work is about how well we excel, how well we do the work that we do. And by being able to have mental fitness around performance improvement in a way that supports and secures our mental health, the sky is the limit. And so we're going to give you some recommendations and next steps on how to get there. But first, where do we start with all this? Understanding what burnout is, part of what we need to do is really get at the heart of what happens in burnout, during burnout, when we're dealing with some of these challenges, and how do we understand and deal with some of the myths that may come from dealing with our burnout. And one of the biggest myths that we have and that you know may not even fully be aware occur is the myth around work life balance. I know we've all heard it. Have work life balance, do work life balance, make work life balance everything. But work life balance is a myth because work or life is not balanced. There are times where we have to put everything into a project that's coming up, or we have to take time off so that we can focus fully on our family or our relationship. And it doesn't necessarily mean in those moments that we're balancing what we have to focus on in this moment with something else at work or in life. And so to think that that is the way that we can operate in a workspace is not only misleading, but it can also lead to behaviors that reinforce burnout in ways that we're not fully aware. The other reason why work-life balance is such a myth is because it looks at work and life as two independent experiences, right? Work is work and life is life. How many people actually experience work or life like that? Can we just leave our life at the door when we get into work? Really hard. And when we think about the opposite of that, when we come home and we're tired after a long day and kids want to play or a spouse wants to talk, do we just leave work at work and say, you know what? I'm feeling refreshed and ready to be able to hug and engage. And hopefully you can do that. But for most people, like, I am too tired. I can't do this right now. You're exhausted from the work. So you're not, even if you're not talking about work, you're not leaving work at the door of your life. And so part of work-life balance makes us put work and life in an either or category. In this binary, you're either doing this or you're either doing that. And that's not how work or life actually works. The last piece of why this is a myth is because sometimes when we think about work-life balance, we think wellness is something you either have or you don't. Mental health is something you have or you don't. And we know that our well-being is on a continuum. It is not something that is an either or is present or is not present. It's on a continuum. And so certain parts of our life can feel like they are really whole and they're healthy. Like maybe our relationships with important people in our life feel really great. And that's why we're turning in this assignment late or never. The less work I do, the better my relationships are, right? And so this idea of it's either this or it's either that really takes away the complexity and the context of what we're creating when we talk about work-life balance. So what are some signs that work-life balance, this myth of work-life balance is shaping your workplace? One, people often say, "Oh, you feeling stressed? You should take some time off." Well, here's the thing about when taking time off is the only thing that people have to say when you're feeling stressed at work and you're dealing with workplace stressors. That means they don't know why you're really stressed. Yes, a part of stress is having a high workload and having to deal with a lot of challenges, but that doesn't get to the root cause of what's driving that stress. You may feel inadequate as a mother or a father. You may feel like there's things you used to do for fun to pour into yourself, you know, being able to do your hobby of martial arts or being able to spend more time on the weekend with your significant other, being able to do all these things that you used to be able to do, you can't do. And that's what's at the heart of you having stress and not just you need to be away from work. And when work can be a part of understanding what's driving it, it can create opportunities to address what's at the heart of your stress. Well, you can't connect with hobbies that you used to have. Well, maybe we have a work program that allows folks to engage in some of those hobbies as a part of their time here. And it allows you to feel refueled and regenerated and recharged in that way, re energized in that way. And so when take time off is the only solution to when people feel burnt out, that is a sign that the organization that where you're working or where a person is working is focused solely on work-life balance and not as focused on how we think about the heart of the stressor and address that so people can show up more effectively. The other part of this that can show up all the time is people want to get work done. And when people want to get work done, it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but having a laser focus on getting tasks done without understanding the toll it takes on individuals completely undercuts the longevity of people being able to do their work effectively. Because if I'm not realizing the trade-offs that are involved with me spending late hours at the job, my mental health or sleep deteriorating tremendously. And now, after I finish this project, you want me to have like a 2-day turnaround to come and do another intense project? And for some folks, they may say, hey, you can't handle it. You know, if you can't handle the heat, get out the kitchen. Well, maybe your kitchen is a fire hazard. And being able to understand how we go about creating these spaces that allow us to understand we still want to have a kitchen left at the end of the day, and we want to have people who are able to cook and produce the things that they need to produce. Well, if that's the case, we have to take into account how much is taking out of them, how much is burning them in these situations. I'm just going to keep going on all of these cooking analogies in terms of what you've been served. Who knows? I might keep going with it the whole time. But this idea of being able to understand the toll it takes on people is such an important part of being able to really debunk this myth of work-life balance. And here's the last piece. Part of what makes burnout so challenging is that it really lines us or aligns with a rigid way of seeing how you deal with challenges, how you deal with problems. If we understand work and life on a continuum, it allows us to open up the options we have to be able to deal with the challenges. And so opportunities for negotiating how to work, if those aren't present in the workplace, usually there's a focus on work-life balance. There might be this perspective that, hey, you know, I want you to go all out in these next couple of days and then you take some time off. And the person may say, I actually don't want time off because my kids are terrorizing me right now. I actually would like to make this project extend a little bit so that I can have time to really think away from home and really work on this so I can do this at a high level. And that negotiation may actually create opportunities for you to extend the project, extend the deadline so that someone can give you a higher quality work. But if there's no opportunities to negotiate how work is done, then what you feel, and both you and that person who has to do the job, is stuck. You feel stuck in terms of how you can move forward because they may give you a lower quality work and you may not get exactly what you want out of the situation because there was no space to be able to negotiate it. And instead you looked at it as an either you're doing work or either you're doing life, and not how can we do both of these together. So how do you show up as a leader, understanding how burnout is impacting people, but still showing the tough leadership that both gets the job done without sacrificing your people? See, the reason why burnout is such an important issue is because it's not just reflecting people who have low energy, who are feeling challenged to show up in a certain way. It's also reflecting a workplace that may need to up his game and up his ability to be able to support the well-being of staff and their mental health in so many ways. In fact, this was such an important issue that U.S. Surgeon General recently developed a framework for understanding workplace well-being and mental health because it was such an epidemic in the current workplace and where we're going in terms of the future of work. What you see on the screen is exactly this framework that has 5 essentials for worker and workplace well-being, as well as being able to understand how to support mental health. And one of the pieces that came from Dr. Vivek Murthy's review of this and this framework he and his team created is that it is not only pivotal for individuals, It's also pivotal for the performance of organizations over the long term. Because if people don't feel good about themselves, they're probably not going to feel good about the work. And if the work doesn't feel good, then the work isn't being done well. And so all of that happens. Much of this begins with the first essential, which is protection from harm, psychological safety, or the feeling that you can show up authentically and that if there's stressful situations, there's someone there to support and help you is profoundly important for people to be able to move forward with their work and to do it effectively. And when you do that in connection or in conjunction with building community and helping people feel like they belong, the second essential, it really accelerates how well individuals work together and how teams trust one another to get the work done. And then ultimately, part of where you want to go is you want to understand both the connection with work life in terms of dealing with the challenges of work in impacting individuals in one area and life impacting individuals in another area, and how those two connect with one another. As we said, wellness is on a continuum, and understanding that continuum is so important for the work that we do. And finally, being able to understand and engage in meaningful ways how people matter at work and feeling that they're not just tolerated, but what they provide is so profoundly important for what they do is foundational for how we do this work. And then ultimately, being able to provide opportunities for people to grow and understand themselves. Research has shown that millennials and Gen Z, the biggest reasons why they leave jobs is because they're getting paid not enough, they're not getting paid enough. That's no brainer. But also because there's no opportunities to grow and they don't feel connected with the work. This is something that is so important. And so what do we do instead of work-life balance? We replace it with work-life harmony. And it gives us this ability to be able to find and understand how our work and life impact one another and be able to draw skills from each. And here's the step you need to know to have a mentally fit culture around leadership is being able to understand emotionally intelligent time management. This is such an important skill. It's being able to understand not just what you need to do, but how what you need to do drains you or energizes your ability to do the work. And this awareness of when meetings are being engaged and how you're structuring meetings and engaging meetings in a way that gets your best energy or recharges you is profoundly important for being able to create a mentally fit workplace culture. And so some of the things that you can do if you're being emotionally intelligent about time management is paying attention to fatigue communication. Fatigue communication is really this form of communication where you know that at the end of the day, you might feel tired and you aren't really in a place to do all of the heavy lifting of, are we going to move this project this way? These are all these concepts that we're negotiating. Well, don't schedule a meeting for that time if you're feeling emotionally drained in that moment. And so being able to plan the high level thinking through concepts meetings early in the day and maybe being able to not only plan those in a way that doesn't further drain you and you show up most effectively, it's also planning those times for recharge. And so when we talk about recharge, being able to give ourselves the ability to recharge effectively so that we are able to do the work that we're being asked to do, not only with our team, but with ourselves so that we can show up at home and in our life most energized and not drained. And so being able to schedule time for reflection and rest allows you to do that. One of the people who I've had the wonderful opportunity to work with who's done this so effectively is the CEO of Kyra, Dev Karaca. Dev is an amazing individual who has co-founded and leads a company that really brings brands and creators together. And so those different social media posts that you see with brands popping up, they don't just come out of nowhere. If you see somebody with Walmart or Nike or these places that you're like, I saw them online, now they're here. Well, Kyra is who brings them together. And what Dev has done as a Forbes 30 under 30 founder is he has thought very intentionally about how we begin to engage individuals who might be dealing with burnout and his team so that they can continue to grow their not only impact on the world, but ensure that they are able to stay for the long run and have the energy to build towards their goals. So he's not sacrificing business or people. And so, Dev, I would love for you to come on and talk a little bit about these past couple of years and how you have found a way to understand the heart of what's driving burnout for some of your team. I'm really appreciating you sharing this. And why don't you share a little bit about that for us, Dev?
Over the last 2 years, and as humans, we've had all of these crazy things happen within our business. We're a startup. We've gone through COVID. We've pivoted our vision, our mission, our business model. These are things that actually change people's job roles. They have to learn new skills, and that can, be something that's extremely scary, especially for people that are on a higher level and have a lot of pressure on them and have to immediately step up. We've gone through layoffs. People have seen their friends and their colleagues perhaps leave the business, and they have to process that information. We've lost clients. Perhaps someone may feel like that was as a result of the work that they did. We've had external PR backlash and internal things as well. We've had hyper growth in revenue as a result of the business vision change that we made. And that in itself comes with all of these quite intense pressures, right? And a lot of work is dumped on your desk, and you feel like you have to get it done to really reach the goals and everything that's set by your managers. We've gone through the Series A funding raise that comes with now externally more people are looking at the business and all of that. And then we're a UK based company, but we have people in New York, we have people in LA, across the US, we have people across Europe. And so running a global business where people are on so many different time zones just inherently has, pressures of communication and, meeting times. And we have this very golden hour or 3 hours basically in the UK, which is 4 to 6 p.m. But over in LA, that's 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. So a lot of our LA staff will actually start work a lot earlier to ensure that they can get online when other people are. So all of these things put pressure on the workforce. And we've worked through different ways to really understand it and see what's causing, perhaps what do we need to concentrate on the most and start to learn about the most and start to try and change and strategize around. And I think that we've done a lot of work together on that. We've done listening sessions with the junior staff, with mid-level, with senior, where we really just look to ask them questions. You actually took one of those sessions with them where there were no senior people in the room, and they just talked and they really gave over a lot of information as to what was causing those pressures and perhaps why they weren't feeling as connected to the business at that time. We have implementation team. We have pulse surveys that go out on a weekly basis that really ask a lot of different and important questions, and we get a lot of information out of that. We have wellness surveys, and now we've recently actually put into department feedback, so different departments can start to explain why one department, the way that they are acting, may actually be causing specific pressures on another department, and therefore opening the communication lines.
Yeah, that's so important, because part of what this process involves is us being able to not just open up communication as leadership, but be able to receive feedback around how we engage not only our staff, but the needs that they have outside of the workplace. And so when we talk about mental fitness, a big part of understanding how burnout is impacting individuals is being able to think about how we're combating, how we're fighting that burnout in a way that allows us to be able to not only meet the need of this moment, but to sustain that over time. One of the things that we talked about, Dev, was really being able to understand how we engage folks once they communicate that there's burnout, that there's something that they feel that they can't do, right? They can't get this project done by this deadline. or they feel like they're working and working and working, and it's still not moving things forward in the way that people are expecting them to move forward. And so how did you really think about addressing and combating this burnout while continuing to reach towards your goals? Because you're still a business, you're still a company, and you got to reach towards your goals. How did you all, and how did we kind of think about moving some of that forward?
We wanted to create a very psychologically safe space for employees to provide feedback, and that's a lot of the work that we did together at the very beginning. A lot of sessions that we did company-wide to make people firstly understand what does a psychologically safe space really mean, and then how to create that environment, whether you're a manager, and you're talking to your team, and whether you're perhaps more junior in the business and you want to speak out and you want to say something. Listening sessions, obviously we talked about that with juniors. I think with those sorts of things, you can gather the data, and then you can pull the strategies together to kind of combat that, and kind of combat the points raised. I think if I say one of the things that I really learned from our conversations, and I've had one-to-one coaching with you, Isaiah. We've spoken about this a lot. It's around sharing the burden. That's like a concept that I've tried to reiterate over and over and over again to the team. I think a lot of the time when you have high performance individuals, you have people that have been that way their entire life. They try to do everything themselves. They don't delegate. They don't reach out to peers for help, and so on. So opening up the levels of communication within the business is key to kind of combating all of this stuff. Giving people the permission to share the burden was something that we worked on a lot. There are going to be points where certain teams are under more pressure. That's the way business works. It ebbs and it flows, and it's important that they are able to reach out to peers and ask for help. Is there an element of a task that can actually be done by someone else right now who's less busy? Is there an element of a task that can be pushed back? And really working with your team to kind of understand those things. So it's really hard to understand those things in isolation, and that's what a lot of people try to do, and they go into their zone. I guess one strategy that we implemented through the implementation team was wellness buddies, which was essentially partnering up individuals in the business with someone of a similar rank, and then giving them, a 30-minute slot that's put into the calendar every 2 weeks, with the purpose of just turning up to that and talking, and that can be work related, it can be non-work related, it can be anything. It's up to them. It's 30 minutes that's in there. And the feedback that we've had around that was incredible. And we did a test and learn on that and gathered data and tried to iterate it and move it forward. But now people meet face to face, they go for a coffee, they build strong bonds with each other. And actually we've even seen people like driving productivity in those meetings by coming up with new ideas for the business organically. So it's like something that started out as a way of increasing connection between employees that may not talk to each other, has resulted in ongoing benefits for the business as well.
That's amazing, Dev, because part of the reason why people don't sometimes want to engage this whole mental fitness or mental health or emotional intelligence is because they're like, we got a job to do. And so we don't have time for all that. Just figure it out, get it done, right? What's outside of work is outside of work. But what you said, and what I think is so important for people to understand, is that this is deeply, deeply intertwined with how well you perform. Because when people don't feel good about themselves, they're not going to feel good about their work. And if they don't feel good about their work, sometimes the work doesn't get done at the highest level, the highest quality. And so this is deeply, deeply intertwined. But being able to be mentally fit as a leader and to be able to create this space that focuses on work-life harmony is only one step to get beyond that myth of work-life balance, because the other piece of this is that when we think about the decision-making processes that we make individually, that leaders make holistically, so much of those decisions shape how people feel engaged or even capable of sharing what is a stressor or what is motivating for them in the workplace. It's these spoken and unspoken rules that can shape whether people feel safe enough to be able to actually do what they need to do in their job, not only the work, but also to be able to communicate what they need to get it done at the highest level. And so one of the greatest myths we have around mental fitness as it relates to decision making is that mental fitness for decision making involves being able to have equality focused decision making processes. You all might be like, you're saying that we shouldn't focus on equality? That's actually exactly what I'm saying. And I know this may be a crazy idea for folks, but equity is different than equality. Equality is giving everyone the same, regardless of what's happening outside of their work, regardless of what's happening outside in their mind or their life. You're giving them the same thing, or you're making the same types of decisions no matter what. And while this at face value may seem like it is addressing the needs of everyone and it's putting everyone in a place where they can succeed at work and they can communicate, what happens is everyone is not receiving those decisions in the same way. They are being impacted in ways that you may not be intending. Intent does not equal impact. And so if people are being impacted in a way that you're not intending, then what can happen at the end of the day is that some people carry more of a burden than others. Dev talked about this, which I think is so important. How do you effectively share the burden? Sometimes sharing the burden means that everyone doesn't have the same burden at the same time. Someone may be at a point in their life where they say, I can take on more. I have less going on outside of work, while this other coworker, they have caregiving responsibilities, whether it's their elderly parents or their kids. And so I know they can't take on this right now in this month because their kids are, starting school. I'll take it on in this month, and next month, this other person can take it on in a different way. And you're sharing the burden more effectively. So being able to understand this equality-focused decision-making is profoundly important for building this mental fitness and debunking the myth of equality-focused decision-making. How do you know that your organization is focusing on equality-focused decision-making? There's a couple of things that come up. First, if someone says, this thing didn't work for me the way you did it, and your first response is, what are you talking about? I treat everyone the same. This reason of I treat everyone the same is oftentimes used to either dismiss or not hear what might be harming certain people, but not impacting others in the same way. And again, while this may be something that really feels like it's allowing you to be fair because you're not picking favorites or you're not choosing one person over another, what we're saying is not about being able to pick favorites or choose someone over the other. What it's about is being able to understand people's lives and context. And from that context, being able to negotiate what will best meet the needs, not only for that individual, but for the organization as a whole. And so when you see in your workplace, people are often saying, hey, I treat everyone the same. When someone is saying this impacted me differently, this can be a sign that you're using equality-focused decision-making that really prevents your team from being mentally fit in this area of decision-making. The other piece that can really show up quite a bit is when you have those folks who want to challenge the unspoken rules, challenge the norms. And instead of that being celebrated, especially when it creates a more fair experience for others, instead it's either retaliated against. People lose opportunities for promotion. They lose opportunities to be on certain committees that have the ability to shape where the company is going or where projects are moving. What that does is that reinforces the idea that while we may at face value or in a performative way want to see everyone be able to manage the challenges around them effectively, when it comes down to the nitty gritty and understanding what's really impacting this particular individual, we don't really care, or we don't have the energy, or we don't have the ability to be able to understand this so that we can find solutions in our workplace that allow us to address it. And what this does in many ways is it can really shape a workplace environment where instead of people thinking about how to support accommodating individuals who have different needs. They think about how to cut them out or avoid contacting them or connecting with them, which can ultimately undermine the work, especially in a workplace where team productivity is a big part of you getting the job done. And so as we think about this idea of decision-making and moving decision-making forward, part of what we want to replace this equality-focused decision-making with is fair and transparent decision-making. This is much different than saying everyone gets the same treatment. It's being able to understand why individuals may need or be provided with certain supports versus others, and being able to communicate that effectively. In addition to this, this also allows for you to have standard processes for how you deal with situations, and those processes may end up having different results. And so here's what I mean by that. You may have a standard process at your workplace where everyone comes into the office a certain amount of days during the week. This is the standard process. But a part of that process is if people live outside of a certain commuting zone, they have the option to be able to have a few extra hours or days at home in order to engage things or to take care of things that may be harder for them to take care of because of their commute and how long it is. Now, this fair and transparent process allows for you to be aware of what's going on, but also be able to meet the needs of folks who may have an additional burden to get the job done. Now, how do we go about doing this in terms of making decisions that reflect this? It begins with mindfulness-based decision execution. Those who understand mindfulness is about being able to be very present with individuals and the work that we do. And that presence allows us to make more intentional decisions. And so to be able to do that, we have to integrate opportunities to pause into our work, as well as be able to give our brains a break from thinking about the decisions we need to make so that we can start to consider the impact that our decisions will have on people, even if our intent is different, before we make that decision. Sometimes we do that reactively, and it can have a huge impact on how we're building relationships and how we're connecting with people. One of the people who I have been able to work with who does this with such thoughtfulness is Anna Suwik, who is the head of people at Kyra. And Anna has to manage people all over the world, as Dev shared, and be able to not only support the work moving forward, but also support their well-being. And I want to invite Anna onto our screen and for us to really hear from you, Anna, and hear about how you have dealt with and engaged some of the tough decisions, and what have some of those tough decisions been that you've had in the workplace and that you've dealt with. Thanks for being with us today, Anna.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. But yeah, like you said, I think workplaces are full of tough decisions. The people function certainly is no exception. I think for me, the one thing that is quite a recurring theme, if you work in the people space, obviously is letting people go. That's something that's always really, really tough and really difficult, especially in a time like at the moment, like generally the economic climate is tricky, and the job market in the UK at least is not the best. So knowing that someone is potentially losing their job for something that isn't their fault in those times is extra hard. I feel like I have really good relationships with all of my colleagues, where that sweet spot in size where we all can still be really close and achieve amazing things, and just knowing how that impacts their life. Personally, like you said before, people like carers, or they have health issues, or they just bought a house, knowing all those things about their life outside of work makes that even harder. So I think especially going through like bigger layoffs where there's, a group of people that are at risk of losing their roles, just dealing with the accumulation of your colleagues' emotions when you have very similar calls all day where people are, for very obvious reasons, quite upset or emotional. It can be really overwhelming, kind of leave you with not enough room for your own feelings.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that room for your own feelings, because when you're having these types of engagements, sometimes people can get overwhelmed by thinking about the mistakes they've made in the past in terms of decisions they've made with others, or being so preoccupied with the future and where I'm going that they're not present, they're not in this moment. And I'm wondering, how have you as a leader been able to think about decision making, but not only that piece of it, but your relationship with others in a way that allowed you to be present, and some of the tools that you brought in play, that you brought into Kyra in order to do that?
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm always trying to, not regret, and just see the learnings. I think I believe that I always make the right decision with the information that I had at the time, and I'm just trying to find peace in that and learn from whatever potentially went wrong in that place. For me personally, I try to separate myself from the decision. That sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but I think once I have worked through the process, I have gone through a very thorough decision making process, factored in all the relevant facts, how it impacts different people within or outside the company, and also processed all my feelings about that. I think that's also really important, because if you don't do that, that's just not going to be sustainable. I think it's perfectly normal to feel sorry or empathetic towards colleagues who are going through that. And I've been laid off in the past myself, so I know exactly what it feels like. But I think that sometimes once I know that the decision that was made was the right or is the best way forward, maybe not, even though it's not ideal, but the least worst way forward, and I know that I followed a really thorough, fair process with my peers, then I just try to separate myself from that. So that's just something that works for me. I think everyone's got other things that work for them. I think a lot of the work that we've done with IOU has been super helpful in understanding myself, identifying my stresses, because I think sometimes we think it's the workload that stresses us, but actually it's something completely different that may be related to work or to our private lives. Finding out what helps me recharge in the time that I have as well. I don't always have half an hour for a lovely walk or 2 days to just lie on the couch. So learning how to understand that better. We've talked about something called the workplace wellness inventory, which I found really, really helpful. So that's been something that worked for me personally. For the wider team, I think, another thing we've covered, I think, in the workshops, something that everyone at Kyra really naturally gravitated towards was the RAVE approach, but also safe and brave agreements. And I think having those tools, not only to understand and support myself better, but also help and understand my team better, has been really, really beneficial. Seeing the team use the words and use the language that we've learned and agreed on together in real life has been incredible as well. So it's been so useful. And yeah, just generally, I think another thing that was, like I mentioned earlier, the RAVE approach. So just learning to reframe a situation is something that I think we've all benefited from when we discovered and learned about that together.
Yes, Anna, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us a bit, and give us some insight, because it's hit of people. I know you have so much that you're managing in different spaces, and you're having to navigate what different demands people have at different moments around the globe and meeting it sometimes all at the same time. I really appreciate you being here with us today, and sharing your insights around everything.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So here's what we're doing as we round out our conversation today, and understanding mental fitness and this idea of being mindful when we are making important decisions, and being able to be aware of what folks' needs are, while also being able to have leadership that focuses on work-life harmony, and how we begin to engage some of those skills. Is at the end of the day, we also need to make sure that our team performs. And so one of the myths of how to help people perform is that you use shame. If people feel bad about themselves, they'll do the work better. That's not true. None of that is true. Shame is this feeling that you're inadequate in so many different ways. And here's how you know shame-based motivation is a part of how your workplace is operating. Staff are feeling, fearful, or that they can't share that they've made a mistake, and they're using so much of their energy trying to correct mistakes that they're not actually doing their work. And many of you have probably heard of this concept that's recently been revealed to us: productivity theater is when people at work, and I'm sure no one in here has ever done that, try to look busy so that your boss doesn't say you're not doing your job. And instead of actually doing your job, you're looking like you're doing your job. And so part of being able to get through this is being able to understand how we begin to create compassion-centered motivation. Here's the truth about this. Shame-based motivation activates your stress response, that part of you that takes energy away from what you're doing so you can protect yourself. Compassion-centered motivation activates your reward center. It's the part of you that moves towards joy and meaningfulness and that feeling that I'm connected with what I'm doing. And what we know about a compassion-centered approach and thinking about whole person performance metrics that look at psychological safety, that understand if people feel connected to their peers, if people feel like they're growing meaningfully in their role, all of this not only allows people to do their job better, but get this, it also inspires loyalty. So many people are having a hard time keeping folks at their job because the reason why people leave their job and stay away from their job is, I don't like my boss. I don't like these other people. And I also don't feel like I'm growing. This has been seen time and time again through recent studies that have looked at this. And so the better that we can create compassion-centered motivation approaches, the better position we are to create experiences that allow people to make mistakes without feeling that the world is coming to an end, and then they don't have to carry that burden with them. Instead, they can really feel supported to innovate and to find innovative solutions for age-old problems, and over time, be able to create opportunities to have gratitude and allow leaders to be vulnerable about who they are and how they're showing up so that they can move forward. I want to close out today by inviting a great leader onto our stage today who is focused on how to build Kyra over these past few years and having to bring together really a challenging group of demands that people have in the workplace related to both needing to have revenue goals, but also wanting to make sure you're not burning your team out to the point where they're like, I'm never coming back. And being able to hold both of those creates an opportunity sometimes that people often don't see. And so I want to invite Sam Joseph, the great Sam Joseph, along with the great Anna we've had and Dev, onto the screen. And I just want you to share a little bit about how you, thinking about leading this team as the Chief Revenue Officer for Kyra, have tried to motivate your team and use some of these tools to move the work forward.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's obviously something that you and I have spoken about quite a bit. I think I would have answered this question probably slightly differently, like pre-COVID. I think the remote working world actually kind of opens up quite a few other new possibilities. I think personally, it's one thing that I found. And yeah, at Kyra, we are 100% remote work. And what it's done is basically open up, an hour plus per day for everyone that, used to be used commuting to work, whether in a car, public transport, so on and so forth. And I think, yeah, sleep is so incredibly important. And so that's one of the things I think straight off the bat that I've always said to my team, like, hey, if you wake up in the morning and you're not quite ready to start the day, like, go back to sleep. Like, it's cool. It's not an issue. I've always felt that if I put the trust that I have in the people in my team, that I will, more than likely get that trust back. And as long as people are, doing their jobs and fulfilling their role and their responsibilities, then, I have no need to impose strict working hours on the team. In similar ways, I'll always say to the team, like, hey, if you, need to fit if you're into fitness and you like to go for runs and you want to go for a run at 3 p.m, like, as long as you can make it work around things and it's not being detrimental to, group work, so on and so forth, like, go for it. Like, I have no issues at all. And so, yeah, I think kind of not micromanaging, I think, in the sense of how people are able to manage their own days. We have morning people and you have night people. Some people don't mind working late if it means that they can start work at 10:30. Some people, not me, are up at 5 a.m. and, would like to finish a bit early. And I think, I think as long as people are doing their job to the best of their abilities, then we should be encouraging people to manage their days as they wish.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I would love just some closing advice on how you've been able to engage not only the work, but help people feel seen, right? This idea of their identity really shapes how they're feeling and expressing and dealing with stress. And sometimes that when that's not noticed or the leader is not engaging that, it can really feel like, why am I here? What am I doing? And that can add stress. And so what would be your advice or even thoughts around how you've engaged that?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a tough one, because I think as a leader, I like to, always start conversations one-on-ones with talking about the person and opening up the conversation to understand how they are, how they're doing, whether that be social, health, what have you. But asking questions that are quite open and open for people to not want to go down a specific route if they don't want to. I don't think it's my responsibility necessarily to push too hard, even if I suspect that maybe there's something that might be up. I think you've got to put out the branch and see if the individual takes it. But I think the wider one, whether it's in one-on-ones or across anything else, is kind of just active listening and active observation. We can all pick things up. We can all, whether it be the way that somebody's, responding to questions, whether it be, things that people say. And I also think this is something that you have to kind of build a picture for over time in having a relationship with somebody. We've just made 2 hires. I don't know the answers to all of those questions yet, because they've only been here for a couple of weeks, but hopefully over time, we'll be able to build that trust, that relationship where they'll feel comfortable in bringing relevant things to me that they feel are, relevant to their role as a worker, and how it affects, their job here at Cairo. So yeah, I think active listening is probably the biggest thing I would push for.
Sam, I so appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about all the things that you have been doing at Kyra to help support the well-being of folks, Anna as well, being able to support all the people, and Dev leading you all through all of this. This has been a great time for us, learning from you all, learning from this way of engaging mental fitness so that, one, you're able to support your staff, not only through what it is you understand about them, but those essentials that you saw in that essentials of understanding workplace well-being and mental health. So I want to encourage you to review those guidelines. They're available online. You can find them pretty easily, the U.S. Surgeon General, but also audit your decision-making processes. Are you focusing on equality-focused decision-making processes, or are you really engaging transparent and fair decision-making processes along the way? And then also being able to identify some well-being metrics. We talked about psychological safety and understanding people's level of connectedness and their ability to grow. Are you engaging this in performance evaluations and engagement surveys? Understanding that is so important. If you all want more information around what we do, feel free to use this QR code. Those are the next steps for you. Here's what we have for you. First, being able to think about how do you grow the emotional intelligence of your staff. You heard a little bit about understanding emotionally intelligent time management, as well as being able to have compassion-centered approaches to being able to motivate your team, and really being able to think about how do you collectively move towards a place where folks understand mental fitness, not just as running away from burnout, but also being able to move forward toward what creates meaning for them, that reward center we talked about. And finally, if your leaders or if you need a coach to be able to understand burnout, this is something that we have found tremendously powerful for so many folks. And so for Mental Health Awareness Month, one of the gifts that we want to give our community is if you want to have either some kind of presentation around mental health awareness or emotional intelligence skills, or coaching, we are actually providing an opportunity for people to receive this throughout the year 2023 at a discount if you book it in May, this month. And so $1,000 off a presentation and a free coaching session or an additional coaching session is available for you when you connect with us in this month. We want to support the growth of our community, to support your mental health, not only of you as a leader, but also support the mental health and well-being of our communities collectively. Because when you have mental fitness in your workplace and you're able to create teams that have mental fitness, they go into the world and they have a life of mental fitness that allows their families and the rest of the people around them to feel like they can fight what they need to fight in order to keep burnout away and to become closer and more connected with who they really are. And that is fulfilling their purpose and contributing at work at the highest level possible. I want to thank you all for your time today. We will be answering questions on a separate email. And as we move forward, feel free to stay in touch with us, stay in contact with us. And thank you so much for being here with us today. We'll see y'all soon. Take care, everybody.